Here we go. Hey guys, this is Jacob from the Mr. Addiction podcast, and we have another topic today that I'm excited about. We're going to talk about why minority communities do not have access to rehab and other treatment. So I have a guest on today, Darrian, my buddy Darrian. He knows all about this stuff. We've been in recovery with each other. We worked in a recovery center with each other. He's a lifelong friend and a brother. So how's it going, Darrian?
Man, doing well. Doing all right, man. I appreciate you having me on.
For sure, man. So let's just open it up right away. This is a little bit of a controversial topic and a different topic, but could you explain from your perspective why maybe the black community is not known to go to treatment, and also why is there no access or hardly any access to outpatient or inpatient treatment for people in minority communities?
Well, to start, I believe that in the black community especially, there's not a whole lot of emphasis on, or the lack of leadership, I would say, towards like finding out ways to, in a sense, better anything as far as addiction goes. You got, for the majority of the African American population, I think the numbers are high as far as like fatherless adolescents. So you have that, and because of the lack of a father and a lack of a leader in the household, you see a lot of teens, especially guys, forming these groups, gangs, and get into a lot of trouble. So usually before there is a, sort of a come to Jesus moment, those kids have already done things to land themselves in jail or in prison.
Yeah, so you're saying it starts with the family unit, the culture problems maybe in the family unit.
Yes,
and having no
sure.
father there also leads to a lack of resources, right? To be able to go to these places.
Yes, for sure. A lack of I would even say desire. I mean, if you think about it, I don't necessarily even know of any gang members, making the idea of getting help, right, a big deal. Like that's not the pushing point. The pushing point is to be crazy and to do ruthless things, if you're a part of those gangs.
So it would somewhat be a badge of honor to sell somebody a tainted fentanyl pill or to die yourself on it. Would be more honorable than going to treatment.
Yeah, because there's really not an emphasis on like getting help, right? The culture sells this whole idea of just be ruthless, be real, be ruthless. There's no, man, I'm gonna figure out whatever I can do to better myself. That's not the selling point for the black community. In a sense, right? That's the selling point isn't hey, let's better ourselves. In that way, it's more so let's just be crazy. And just because of the lack of leadership, the lack of a father in the family,
Yeah, let me share this with you real quick, and just so maybe the listener can understand, we're gonna just break down a number real quick and tell me what you think of this, Darrian. This is from an article from the JAMA Network about how fentanyl is affecting all different communities, minority communities, white communities, just everybody. And before I begin, the numbers are astronomical. The death rate is unreal. And so it says, fueled largely by illicit fentanyl, The relative overdose death rate increased by 44% among black people and 39% among American Indian and Alaska Native individuals. The largest increases of the population group study. So, in comparison, the data shows a 22% relative rate increase among white people. And so, the point of this interview is not to make it about race, or because we know how divided our country is on that. The point is like the whole channel. We want to raise awareness, and I've been to numerous rehabs in my life, and I'll tell you, man, I really could count on my hand. You being one of them, I could count on my hand the number of African American people or really Latin people that I've met in those rehabs. It's predominantly been white. And so, what do you think of that? Those numbers and the fact that you just don't find people from minorities a lot in rehabs. But
Yeah,
but the numbers show they're dying, right?
yeah. And again, I just keep it. I just keep going back to the just the culture. Especially in you find it a lot in rap music. It's not necessary. All growing up as a young teen in a impoverished community, none of my friends were ever like, hey, I want to kind of better myself in this manner or that manner. And again, that depends. It's not. That's not a blanket statement for all black people. By the way, there are tons of black people. I have tons of friends, family members that just didn't get caught up in the street life. That are doing great things for the community, that are encouraging others to get better, to better themselves. So that I'm not making a blanket statement for all. But I feel like you don't necessarily, the numbers are crazy like that, I believe, in part because that there is like a certain sect of minorities that are heavy into drugs and gang activity, that it's not, there's no leadership that's teaching, hey, this is what we need to do to get better and better ourselves. By the time it gets to the point of we need to better ourselves, usually it's too late, right? Somebody's either in prison or ended up in just a very terrible situation. So I believe that in part that 50%, the rise in African Americans specifically, is just because there's no leadership in a sense. Like there's no leadership to that will guide them away from that life, that causes them to seek help. And that's really what I think it is.
Yeah, what's crazy is you look at something like the fentanyl epidemic. You look at how COVID was. COVID doesn't care about race, really. But people had less access to health care than other people. But this is way worse than COVID, honestly. And it's no matter what community it's from. I mean, it's the leading cause of death from people to 18 to 45, which blows my mind because that means it beat cancer and car wrecks. In fentanyl overdose. It's just mind-boggling. But it's also a real high spike in teen deaths of teens from all over the world, and from different cultures, different backgrounds, poor, rich. It just kind of shows you that we really all need each other, man, and need to work together because, I don't see an end to this with the borders being wide open and everything and just how fentanyl is poured in here. I don't see an end to it. So,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say that the border thing that you brought up, I think that's a big deal. It's a huge deal, because you notice all throughout history, and especially just understanding. I was doing some reading earlier today, and I noticed that specifically Mexico is one of the biggest producers of fentanyl, as well as China, and another, a few more other countries. But our borders are not secure, and it's causing a lot of, fentanyl to be pouring into America through, by Mexico. So I think that's a huge deal too. That's a big deal, and we know that usually where these drugs end up are in minority communities, so into the hands of drug dealers. So, and that is to, of course, enhance the effects of even other drugs like cocaine, um, and that kind of thing. So the border is I feel like not securing our border is the reason I feel like we have such a huge spike in deaths from fentanyl.
Absolutely. And what is so insane is, like you said, most of it comes from China. My understanding is they make the chemicals and then they send all those chemicals to Mexico, and Mexico's where they kind of press them and make them look like legitimate pills. And, it's brought over here and dumped into the minority communities, like you said, and then it makes its way out to the richer communities. And, this is different than anything we've ever seen. We've never seen, when you and I were growing up, people would pass out pills, you want to try this, and we would try it, but you never had to worry about falling over dead within 10 minutes, or having to carry Narcan on you so you can save your friend's life. And I do, and again, it's not political. That's just the fact. The border's wide open. The fentanyl deaths and the amount of drugs they're seizing in different states is at an all-time high. And we're just asleep to it. And I don't even think the rehab community can keep up with it. And so let me ask you this, just switching gears. Have you ever seen, because you grew up in the hood, you grew up in a minority community, have you ever seen a rehab in one? I'm not saying there's not any, but have you ever seen one?
Never seen one. I didn't realize that really that there was a such thing as a rehab until maybe 16 years old. I had never really heard of the idea of a drug rehabilitation center. So that's not a thing that is kind of pushed in the Black community at all. There's just this, grab yourself by the bootstraps and just face life. Is what I was taught, as a kid. So now it's crazy that you bring that up, because I've never didn't hear about a rehab until I was a little bit older.
Yeah, which is mind-boggling, because rehab in the white community is seen as one of the best things you can do for somebody. And I'm not bashing. I'm not saying that white people shouldn't go to rehab or whatever. My point in it mainly is that because of the way it's been with crack, and all the other drug epidemics I think minority communities have faced. And I'm just going to be honest, they get to the white communities later and it just seems like now it's a big deal, and these are people. And so I do think you're right. It's a part of personal responsibility and a willingness to get help. You can't be hard and tough, man, if you're not alive. And so that's kind of a fantasy idea, but really, dude, just even hearing you say that, and I just think it's a shame in our country, man, as much money as we have and programs that we have, and as high as the numbers are, the death rate in minority communities, I think it's a shame that they don't have access to treatment,
Right.
And like you said, they don't know. So if you don't know, what are you supposed to do? And so my question is how can I get out there? How can we get out there if you have any advice for any of us, how can we get out there and raise awareness and get treatment centers built in the inner cities?
Well, so I think just bringing up the conversation is just a big deal, right? Even for beginners, because it's not really talked about, right? It's not really that sort of thing is for minority communities. It's just not even a topic for discussion. So I think just raising awareness, doing things like you're doing right now, getting the conversation started is a great first step. Um, of course, when it comes to the government, they are always doing a whole lot for the minority community as it is. With food things like food stamps and Medicare. They're they've already been doing as much as they can for the minority community on that end. But again, these drugs are coming into the United States, and their first stop or their intended destination is into usually in the minority communities. That's where all the drugs are received and manufactured and distributed. So goodness, man, like you wonder, how what do you do about that? I mean, that is the destination, right? That's where everybody is going to get their drugs from. That's where the majority of the drugs distributed across America are sold. So there should be a lot more awareness raised for, you know, rehab, especially for the Black community. If that's indeed where, it's being distributed mostly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I get convicted about, and um, you know,
So,
yeah, and I just think of all the times that I've been able to receive help, and not just help I paid for, because I've been poor most of my adult life. But I've had a lot of people reach out and invite me into their rehab or help me in my recovery process. But even AA meetings, man, I have been to a lot of AA meetings and a lot of recovery meetings in church. And just to be honest with you again, I just see a very low number of minorities in all of those places. And I never noticed it until I started studying all this fentanyl stuff and reading articles. And I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, have I ever seen hardly any black people or Latin people in those meetings? And I'm sure it goes on. I have seen a few, but not many. It's predominantly white, which I know the percentage of white people in our culture is real high. But I'm just saying, I don't think there's any denying, man, a lack of access. Like you said, it starts with no leadership and no resources, man.
no resources,
And then
for sure.
when you tie in, like you said, it's a badge of honor to die from this stuff or to sell this stuff and kill someone else. I mean, you got a really twisted cycle going on.
Yeah, real bad. Well, and I mean, for the most part, the mindset when you're in that, when you're raised in the hood, I mean, usually you get to a certain age and you think to yourself, man, there's really no hope for your life. Um, there's not necessarily because there's no vision, right, of what would be better. If you've been raised in that sort of environment, you get older and think, okay, this is what life is like. You know what I mean? And this is what all my friends have done. This is what my family members have done. And you usually, the numbers don't lie. But I mean, as a Black man, as a kid growing up in a impoverished community, for the most part, the end is either prison or death. For the most part, lack of leadership.
Right, because the treatment, like usually in AA, they say jails, institutions, and death, and you're saying in that community it's jail or death. There is no institution.
No, not really at all.
To stop the way. Well, and look, like I know these are broad topics, and I'm not, an expert at it. I just have dealt with addiction like you have since I was a kid, and I just appreciate you coming on and talking about it because it's a topic that a lot of people are scared to talk about. You're going to get canceled or you're going to make this political party unhappy or whatever. But I don't care about all that. We're talking about people's lives, man, kids' lives, teenagers. You know, um, and so, you got any closing thoughts, man?
Um, yeah. Again, man, I want to let you know how much I appreciate um, the concept of your podcast and all that you are trying to do to raise awareness for um, people that are caught in drug addiction. Um, and just speaking just on behalf, I guess, of the Black community, um, you know, there's a lot of minorities who are seeking help, who do go out and make a difference, that are in favor of people getting their lives back together. And I just want to let you know I appreciate you helping and being a voice so that we might be able to better the whole epidemic in America in general. So I just want to let you know I appreciate that.
Yeah, dude. Well, I mean, I really appreciate it. I have so much pride; it's hard for me to take a compliment. You know that.
Uh-huh.
But what really strikes me, man, what's hit my heart is, and you know how obsessed I get with things, like, because I am an addict, like in my flesh, and um, I think what's really hit me is I would have been one of these kids, man. I took so many pills at parties, and I just was a big pill head in high school, and the difference back then is we had a fighting chance to even get into rehab, and now they don't. Now these kids are being. I don't care if because you have people say, Darrian, you have people say, well, they deserve it. That's what drug addicts deserve. But this is different
Right,
because these kids are buying and being told these pills are something else, and they're being sold poison, you know? And
right,
I just think that would have been me. And that breaks my heart when I look at these 16, 17-year-old kids, man, popping a pill before they go lay down in bed, thinking they're like fooling their parents. And, that's it. Off to eternity, dude. And that just crushes me that we've gotten to a point in our society where that's okay, you know?
right.
And
Yeah, it's
so
sad.
I equally appreciate you and equally appreciate everyone who is making a difference in the Black community. Like you said, I don't want this all to be negative. There's tons of people doing stuff. I'm sure people whose names we don't even know,
Right.
but at the same time, the numbers don't lie. And we all have to fight against this, man, because it's not slowing down. And I really fear, and I'm not even exaggerating, in the next 5 years, we're going to start seeing people dead in the street. It's going to be
Right.
so prevalent. So I don't understand.
Absolutely.
I don't understand how we threw everything at COVID. Again, not getting political, but looking at the numbers. We were so obsessed with saving people in COVID, but with this thing, it's like, oh man, just let the junkies die.
Right.
Insane to me.
Right. Well, and again, the same. I don't not trying to make this thing political or anything like that, but just like opening the borders, you know, um, goodness, like that is a recipe for a disaster, the same disaster that we're seeing right now.
In the middle of a
And
fentanyl crisis, by the way. In the middle of it.
yes, knowing that all these drugs like fentanyl are being hauled into America from out of the country, it's just, it's appalling. How come, why are they allowing that to happen? Things like on the border of Texas, people from Mexico are flooding in. And some of these people, not all, but some of these people are bringing in drugs, obviously, right? For fentanyl. And it's like, what do we do about that, right? What are we paying our government officials to do? As far as like guarding, national security and all that sort of thing. So
Well, you know
really
what?
deeply question that.
I just want to say this before I forget. I definitely agree with you. And look, man, they have failed to protect us. They're worried about their self interest on both sides, and they have failed to protect their own citizens, from a deadly plague that's hit our streets. And I don't know. It's absolute insanity, man. But I think a lot of things our government does is insanity. And I question all these grandstanding speeches about ending the war on fentanyl and the war on drugs. I mean, the way the government's handled drugs from the beginning has been a total failure. You can't punish people out of using. Like, you know what I mean? It's way deeper than that. So, but all right, man, we'll wrap this up. We're about at our limit here, and guys, I just wanted to say again, we're not making political statements. We're not making race statements. We're just trying to raise awareness, and this is a super important topic. So try to put your worldviews down for a second, and remember, we're talking about people dying. We're talking about teenagers dying, mothers losing their kids, and a whole generation being wiped out. So it's way bigger. It's way bigger than our worldview. Darrian, I appreciate it, man, so much.
Oh, you bet, brother.
All right, man.
Thank you so much.
Roll Tide, man.